There is a number that oncologists, the doctors who spend their entire careers treating cancer, keep coming back to in their research. And that number is 40. 40% of all cancers could be prevented. Not with a drug, not with a genetic procedure, not with anything that costs a significant amount of money or requires a prescription. 40% gone through lifestyle choices that most people either don't know matter this much or know about in the vaguest possible terms and never actually implement. That figure comes from Harvard researchers whose work was published in JAMA Oncology, one of the most respected oncology journals in the world. And the same study found that the same habits that prevent 40% of cancer cases also prevent 50% of cancer deaths in the United States. Half of the deaths. But here's the part nobody talks about clearly enough. These habits matter most after 50. That is not a coincidence. Your body changes after 50 in ways that are specific, biological, and measurable. And understanding exactly what those changes are is what transforms this from generic health advice into something you'll actually take seriously. So stay with me, because we are going to go through the actual science, the specific habits, the real numbers from real research published in 2025 and 2026, and the things that doctors who study cancer every day quietly do themselves. First, let's understand why 50 is the inflection point. Because if you don't understand what's happening biologically, the habits won't feel urgent. They'll just feel like another list of things you should probably do. Your body has been fighting cancer your entire life. Every day, cells in your body accumulate genetic errors. Small copying mistakes when cells divide, damage from things you're exposed to, random replication glitches that happen constantly and invisibly. Your immune system hunts down these abnormal cells. Your DNA repair mechanisms fix the errors before they compound. Your body has multiple layers of internal surveillance, and for most of your life, it handles this quietly and extraordinarily well. After 50, that system starts losing ground. The efficiency of DNA repair mechanisms measurably declines with age. Cells that have reached the end of their functional life enter a state called senescence. They stop dividing, but they don't die. Instead, they begin releasing inflammatory signals into the surrounding tissue. Researchers call this the senescence-associated secretory phenotype. What it creates is a low-grade chronic inflammatory environment, not the acute inflammation you'd feel from an injury, but a slow-burn background inflammation that makes the tissue around these senescent cells more hospitable to tumor growth. At the same time, your immune system undergoes a process called immunosenescence. It becomes slower, less sensitive, less effective at identifying and eliminating the abnormal cells that would have been cleared efficiently in your 30s. The cells that are going wrong don't get caught as quickly. They survive longer. They accumulate more mutations. And eventually, some of them cross the threshold from abnormal to cancerous. This is not fear-mongering. This is biology. And the important thing about biology is that it responds to what you give it. 70% of people who die from cancer are over the age of 65. That statistic tells you where the window is. The decade between 50 and 60 is when the habits you establish, or fail to establish, set the trajectory for the next 20 years of your cellular health. Let's start with the one thing that most oncologists consistently name when asked what they personally do every day to reduce their own cancer risk. Movement. A 2025 study from the National Cancer Institute, using data from the UK Biobank with a median participant age of 63, tracked total daily physical activity in thousands of people using wrist-worn accelerometers. The finding was direct. Individuals with the highest total daily activity had a 26% lower risk of developing cancer compared to those with the lowest activity levels. 26% from movement. And the threshold that kept appearing across the research was not extreme. 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise, that is 30 minutes, 5 days a week, at the level of a brisk walk, meets the standard recommended by the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, and the National Cancer Institute. What is exercise actually doing biologically? It is reducing the chronic systemic inflammation that makes tissue environments favorable to cancer growth. It is improving insulin sensitivity because elevated insulin and IGF-1, the growth factor that responds to it, promote cell proliferation in ways that can accelerate tumor development. It is supporting healthy immune function, helping maintain the immunosurveillance that becomes less efficient with age. And it is directly impacting tumor microenvironments in ways researchers are still mapping. The CO21 Challenge Trial, a major randomized controlled trial published in 2025, found that a structured exercise program after colon cancer chemotherapy produced a 28% lower risk of cancer recurrence compared to standard care. That is after diagnosis. In prevention, the benefits are even more accessible. A 2025 meta-analysis covering 151 studies and almost 1.5 million cancer patients found that physical activity after diagnosis was associated with a 31% lower risk of breast cancer death, a 29% lower risk of colorectal cancer death, and a 24% lower risk of lung cancer death. The research community's language around exercise and cancer has shifted recently. It is no longer a nice-to-have. In the words of one cancer researcher responding to the challenge trial, it is a need-to-have. The second habit is one that most people intellectually understand but emotionally resist because it sits inside a cultural norm that is 5,000 years old. Alcohol. In January 2025, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services released its most direct statement to date on alcohol and cancer. The 2024 to 2025 dietary guidelines, quoting the evidence directly, stated that even drinking within what was previously considered moderate limits may increase cancer risk. Less than 1 drink per day increases the risk. There is no established safe threshold for alcohol and cancer. The biology is not subtle. When your body metabolizes alcohol, it produces acetaldehyde, a compound that directly damages DNA. It generates reactive oxygen species that cause oxidative stress and inflammation in tissue. It disrupts hormone levels, particularly estrogen, which is directly relevant to breast cancer risk. It suppresses immune function. And in the presence of tobacco smoke or other carcinogens, it acts as a solvent, making it easier for those carcinogens to be absorbed through the lining of the throat and mouth. Alcohol has been classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the same category as tobacco. That classification covers cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, colorectum, and breast. It is not theoretical. The causal relationship is established, and yet fewer than 50% of Americans are aware that alcohol is a cancer risk factor. Most people, when they think about alcohol and health, think about liver disease or drunk driving. The cancer connection is not part of the cultural conversation in the way it needs to be, and that gap in public awareness is genuinely consequential. After 50, when DNA repair is already slowing and cellular surveillance is already less efficient, removing a substance that directly damages DNA and actively promotes the inflammatory conditions that cancer exploits is not a sacrifice. It is the clearest, most mechanistically supported intervention on this list. The third habit is about what you eat, but not in the vague eat healthy framing that doesn't actually change anyone's behavior. Specifically, ultra-processed foods. In the last few years, a consistent body of research has built an association between ultra-processed food consumption and cancer risk. A 2025 systematic review found that high consumption of ultra-processed foods was linked to increased risk across multiple cancer types through 3 main pathways: chronic systemic inflammation driven by emulsifiers, preservatives, and refined ingredients; disruption of gut microbiome diversity, which affects immune function; and direct exposure to additives that the body was not designed to metabolize at the concentrations found in a typical processed food diet. One study found that individuals with the highest ultra-processed food intake faced a 1.5-fold increased risk of developing early-onset colorectal tumors. Colorectal cancer is the 3rd most common cancer in the United States and the 2nd leading cause of cancer death. And after 50, it is one of the cancers where the surveillance gap, the slowing immune response, becomes most consequential. What does this look like practically? The shift that consistently appears in research is not about achieving a perfect diet. It is about significantly reducing the proportion of calories that come from packaged, industrially manufactured products and replacing them with whole, minimally processed foods. Fiber-rich vegetables, legumes, and whole grains are particularly supported in colorectal cancer research. The gut microbiome responds to increased dietary fiber. The inflammatory baseline shifts. The intestinal lining receives the compounds it needs to maintain its protective function. The fourth habit requires a conversation that is just beginning to enter mainstream health discussions, even though the science behind it has been building for over a decade. Sleep, and more specifically, the integrity of your circadian rhythm. Research at Scripps Research Institute found that mice with lung cancer who were exposed to conditions simulating chronic jet lag developed 68% more tumors than those with regular sleep cycles. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified shift work that disrupts circadian rhythms as a probable human carcinogen back in 2007. Chronic circadian misalignment has since been linked to elevated risk of breast, colorectal, lung, liver, and pancreatic cancers. The mechanism is direct. During sleep, particularly deep sleep, your body conducts critical DNA repair work. The immune system is most actively clearing cellular debris and abnormal cells during overnight hours. Hormone regulation, including cortisol, melatonin, and growth hormones, operates on a circadian schedule that sleep disruption throws into disorder. When the schedule is consistently disrupted, the DNA repair window shrinks. The immune clearance is less complete. The hormonal cycles that regulate cell growth become erratic. After 50, when all of those systems are already operating with less efficiency, consistently protecting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep is not a comfort preference. It is biological maintenance. And then there is the fifth habit, the one that oncologists and researchers have started addressing more directly in the last 2 years, because the data became too consistent to sideline. Chronic stress. Studies in the general population have found that people with higher sustained stress levels are up to twice as likely to die from cancer as those who manage stress more effectively. The mechanism runs through inflammation. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which in sustained high doses suppresses the immune system and promotes inflammatory processes. It runs through behavioral pathways. Stressed people sleep less, exercise less, make worse nutritional choices. And research has found a more direct mechanism. Chronic stress can reactivate dormant tumor cells, cancer cells that were present but suppressed, by altering the tissue environment around them in ways that allow previously contained cells to become active again. This is not a reason to feel guilty about stress. Chronic stress is not a personal failure. It is a physiological response to circumstances, and the circumstances of life after 50 are real. Career pressure, financial complexity, health challenges in yourself or family members, life transitions. The research is not suggesting you eliminate stress. It is suggesting that creating consistent, structured recovery from stress, whether through regular physical activity, meditation, time in nature, or meaningful social connection, is not optional self-care. It is a biological intervention with measurable cancer prevention effects. The sixth habit is the one that the medical community most consistently emphasizes as the single most powerful tool over which you have direct control after 50, and it does not require any lifestyle change at all. It requires a phone call. Screening. Early-stage cancer, detected before it has spread beyond its origin point, has a 5-year survival rate across most cancer types that exceeds 90%. Late-stage cancer, detected after spread, drops that number dramatically. For colorectal cancer specifically, the 5-year survival rate at stage 1 is around 90%. At stage 4, it falls below 15%. The cancer itself has not changed. What has changed is when it was found. After 50, the standard recommendations are colonoscopy starting at 45 to 50 for both men and women, repeated every 10 years if results are normal. Annual mammograms for women starting at 40 to 45, with particular importance from 50 onward. PSA testing conversation with a physician for men, starting around 50. Low-dose CT scan of the lungs for current or former heavy smokers. And an annual general examination that includes skin checks, particularly for fair-skinned individuals or those with significant sun exposure history. None of these are comfortable conversations. Some of these procedures are not particularly enjoyable. But every oncologist who has seen the difference between stage 1 and stage 4 in the same cancer type will tell you the same thing. The colonoscopy is not the worst thing that can happen. Not catching it is. There is a reason oncologists do these things themselves. Not because they are afraid, and not because they are certain their habits will protect them, but because they understand the biology clearly enough to know that the choices they make every day are either supporting their body's cancer surveillance systems or undermining them. The research on lifestyle and cancer is no longer preliminary. It is robust, it is mechanistic, it is peer-reviewed across hundreds of thousands of study participants. The finding that 40% of cancers are preventable is not an optimistic estimate. It is a conservative one based on 4 specific habits, documented across 136,000 people over years of follow-up. You are past 50, or you are approaching it, or someone you care about is. The biology changes at this point. But what this science consistently shows is that the biology responds. The inflammation markers fall when exercise becomes regular. The DNA repair window is protected when sleep is prioritized. The hormonal disruption from alcohol resolves when alcohol is reduced. The gut environment shifts when ultra-processed foods are replaced with whole ones. The immune surveillance strengthens. The body wants to work. It has been working for you your entire life. The habits that matter after 50 are the ones that give it the resources to keep doing that.